Oh boy. Here we go then. This is a terrible idea because I haven't planned this out in advance. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm going to say. This is very much loads of people are asking me how I rate Metroidvanias and what order I'd recommend and yada yada yada. It's like, I don't really know. So I'm going to record myself trying to find out, because that's the kind of terrible content that I like to produce for YouTube. I've been through my Steam library and all of the other various video game libraries that I've got, plus my very limited memory, and I have written down a list of all of the Metroidvanias that I own. You'll notice that there is a category for unplayed or unfinished on here. Yes, some of these games I've bought and never played. Some of these games I've bought and started at some point and never finished. Some of these games I do not remember a damn thing about. And that means that this is going to be great fun. So, in order to facilitate this, I've got my Steam library on one monitor. I've got the window capture on for this. I've got a load of tools so that I don't have to write a script, because I don't want to write a script. Script writing takes forever. So let us begin. One thing that you need to be super aware of just before we start, actually, is that my played time, but I'm going to tell you what my played time is for all the ones that I've got that information for. My played time for any of these Metroidvanias should not be indicative of how long the Metroidvania game takes to play or anything like that, because obviously a lot of these I've made maps for, and that means possibly several playthroughs. It also possibly means that I've left the game running in the background whilst I've been doing something map-wise. It's not a very good indication at all. Let's go through them in roughly an order, shall we? Let's start off with 3000th Jewel. 3000th Jewel is a fairly generic Metroidvania. It's a 2.5D Metroidvania from an indie Chinese, I think, developer. It's all right. It's got all of the hallmarks of a Metroidvania without any of the exciting flourishes that really make it stand out in any way, shape or form. But it's not bad. It's certainly playable. I've got almost 30 hours in it. It's not a bad game. It's just kind of generic. It's almost like a template game. 8 Doors, Aram's Afterlife Adventure. Really great graphical style. I really like the actual story and artwork. I do not like the hitboxes in this game whatsoever. I've got a playthrough of 8 Doors on YouTube, and the number of people that have commented about, oh yeah, these hitboxes are awful. You know, it's got a good map, which I really liked, actually. I've got 18.3 hours in 8 Doors. I really like the idea behind this game. Just the end results are kind of mixed for me. 9 Years of Shadows. Short, sweet, good music, good pixel art. Possibly could have done with a little bit more time in the oven. It was a Kickstarter game that I backed. I feel like there should have been more to it than there was. But in terms of length, it's very Symphony of the Night-esque. I've got about 7 hours in it. It's not bad. It's not bad at all. I'd argue it's better than the lower two that we've got on here so far. But in terms of value for money, some people are going to be a little bit miffed with it, I think. Eterna Noctis. Oh boy, where do I put Eterna Noctis? Since this is my list and my preferences, I'm putting it down at B. Now, a lot of people want to put Eterna Noctis up here. And if you like really long value for money games with really challenging platforming, yeah, Eterna Noctis is going to be up there for you. It's got great hand-drawn animation. It's got some really good ideas, but it is bloated beyond measure. And at the time I'm recording this, which is kind of mid to late April, it's going to get a DLC update with 2 new areas in it, which is going to make it even bigger than it was before. I found it too finicky for its own good. Is it a good game? Yes. Is it a substantial game? Oh, yes. Massively substantial. I've got 23.8 hours in it from, I think, a single playthrough. So it's big. It's a big, big game. It's a gorgeous game. It's got some really good ideas. I played on the easy mode just because I did not find the hard or the quote-unquote normal mode enjoyable at all. But it does come highly recommended by a lot of serious Metroidvania players, to the extent that a lot of people said it beats Hollow Knight. I disagree entirely. But that's where I'd put it. And, you know, this is people are asking me for my list. After Image, unplayed, technically. I've played the demo. The actual game is due to come out in like a couple of days. From what I've seen of it so far, it looks decent, albeit it needed some work. More info on that one to come, I guess. Alwa's Legacy. B. Really enjoyed Alwa's Legacy. Retro Metroidvania with a, and I always get this wrong, is it an 8-bit style or a 16-bit style? I think it's 16-bit. It's SNES era style. I've got 26.8 hours in Alwa's Legacy, but keep in mind, again, I made a map for this one, so it took a good chunk of time. Quite a big game. Got some interesting ideas and interesting mechanics, and some occasionally annoying, slightly fiddly bits. But I recommend Alwa's Legacy if you haven't tried it. It's also available on cartridge, I think. I think the developers made a kind of NES version of it in 8 bits after they completed the 16-bit one. I don't know why, but that's quite a cool idea. So, yeah, maybe check that one out, should you fancy something like that. Angel's Gear. Yeah. Angel's Gear. It's all right. No, actually, no. It's all right, is Angel's Gear. I've got 4.6 hours in it, so it's not a particularly long game. It's a game with some good ideas. It's short, but it's sweet, and it's got a really cool aesthetic. I like the premise of it. I like the idea of it. It's just not a massive game. It's reasonably short, but it's got some good ideas. I just don't think it's quite as polished as maybe it could be. It was a fun little game for what I played of it, but it's not winning any awards from me. Don't know where Apothion's gone. Apothion's in my library, but it's not on my list. I seem to have missed the what's it for. Either way, Apothion was going to go down into unplayed. Ares Extinction Agenda. Didn't finish it. There are multiple different versions of Ares Extinction Agenda. It's more of a Mega Man game than a Metroidvania, I think. I can't really remember anything about it, save for the fact that you're a robot-y thing. I vaguely recall enjoying what little time I spent on it, but I certainly didn't finish it. According to this, I last played it in 2011, so it's not stuck with me at all. These seem to be in a really weird order in my Steam library, for whatever reason. Oh, we'll just keep on going. Ascension. I have got 15 minutes played in it. I couldn't tell you a darn thing about it. It's possible that it was a game that I played that I meant to come back to. I played it in September 2021, so maybe I got distracted. Maybe I was working. I don't know. It hasn't stuck with me in any way, shape, or form. Does that mean it's a bad game? No. If it was a bad game, it's, well, I don't want to put it. I'm not saying that D are bad games. It's just one that I didn't finish or go anywhere with. So, yeah, try that one out for yourselves, I think. Astalon, Tears of the Earth. 27.3 hours in Astalon. I made 2 maps for Astalon. Big game. Got a character switching mechanic that starts off as a little bit of a hindrance, but becomes more interesting when you get certain items later on in the game. Can be a little bit challenging. When I played it, there were a couple of bugs, but I believe those have been fixed at this point. I last played it in 2021. I 100%ed this one, actually. I got all the achievements in this one, which I don't always do. I enjoyed Astalon a great deal. It's got a nice kind of retro style to it, which I think is 8-bit, I think, for Astalon. I liked it. But I don't know whether I'd ever play it again. That being said, that 27.3 hours, as well as making maps, it does also include multiple run-throughs of the game, because it's one of those games that unlocks different modes, you know, like the old Castlevania games did when you can unlock the Axe Armor mode or the Richter mode. Astalon has a similar thing, so it's got plenty of replayability in that way, and I think there's a speedrunning community for it, but don't quote me on that. Atto, not entirely sure how to pronounce it. I really enjoyed Atto for the 8.7 hours that I played of it. It's an interesting game in the sense that there are there's no trash enemies in it. All of the enemies in the game are bosses in some way, shape, or form. So it's reasonably linear from what I remember. It's got a very kind of basic, almost drawn in Microsoft Paint style art style to it. It's arguably not a looker, but the gameplay is fun. And it's not super expensive either. So I don't know whether there's a demo available for it, but it's one that I would kind of recommend if it's on sale or if it's cheap. I don't even know what it's currently at. But yeah, Atto was all right. It got some good ideas, and I quite enjoyed it. Axiom Verge. Solid Metroid-like game. Great visual pixel art style. Cool, Geiger-esque plot, really weird, really interesting. I really enjoyed Axiom Verge. Thing is, Axiom Verge is one of those games that you don't need me to recommend it to you, because when it comes to lists of really good Metroidvanias, Axiom Verge is always going to be recommended to you. As opposed to, in my opinion, Axiom Verge 2, which I just did not think was very good at all. I thought Axiom Verge 2 was a massive step back from the first game. I can't tell you how much time I've got in Axiom Verge 2. I can tell you I've got 14.8 hours in Axiom Verge 1, because I actually got Axiom Verge 2 on Epic, I think it was. And I haven't got that open. I really wanted Axiom Verge 2 to be more of Axiom Verge 1, and it wasn't. The really cool, interesting combat from Axiom Verge 1 was basically non-existent in Axiom Verge 2, and whilst it had a pretty map, although kind of difficult to find things on, and it got some interesting dimension switching mechanics, I just don't think it was anywhere near as good or fun or enjoyable a game as the first one. But I know a lot of people love it. I just didn't. And I'm hoping Tom Happ for Axiom Verge 3, as and when that comes out, makes it a bit more like the first one than the second one, if I'm honest. A robot named Fight. I have got 0 hours in a robot named Fight. I bought it when it was on sale and I haven't played it. It's a Metroidvania, but I think it's got some co-op-y stuff, and I think it's a little bit more kind of beat 'em up than Metroidvania. I don't know anything about it, so I couldn't tell you whether it is good or not. And the same goes for Batbarian, which looked pretty decent. I've got 2.5 hours in Batbarian, and I think I wanted to like it, but I didn't like it enough to finish it. Again, a lot of people really like Batbarian, and again, I think it's got a pretty decent speedrunning community. But I couldn't personally recommend it because I haven't finished it. Biogun is also going down in the unplayed, unfinished. I expect Biogun to go up once I've actually played it, but the game's not out yet. I really enjoyed the demo. If I was to base this on, demo playthroughs, that would go there, and that would also go there. But I haven't played them yet because they haven't released yet. So I couldn't tell you how good I think those are. Blasphemous! I fucking love Blasphemous. Blasphemous is an amazing game. I have got many hours. 61.7 hours. That's by no means the highest number of hours that I've got in a Metroidvania game on this list, but Blasphemous was brilliant. I really enjoyed it in its initial release, and every subsequent update to Blasphemous has just made it better and better and better. Blasphemous, if you haven't played it and you consider yourself a fan of the Metroidvania genre, is one that I recommend. It is a little bit soulsy in terms of its mechanics, but you'll probably find that pretty much all of the higher tier games that I put on this list will be a little bit soulsy in terms of their mechanics. So yes, Blasphemous is brilliant. Blasphemous 2 coming out this year. Another game that I highly recommend, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. 29.3 hours I've played of Bloodstained. It is from the creator of Castlevania Symphony of the Night. So if you are a fan of Symphony, then you're pretty much guaranteed to like Bloodstained. It is a Castlevania game. It's an Igavania game in all but the actual trademarked name. Highly recommend Bloodstained if you haven't checked it out already. I bought it on PC and Switch. I do not know whether they have fixed the Switch version. I'd read up on that if I were you, because the Switch version ran like ass when I got it. I don't have a Switch anymore, so I couldn't tell you whether it is... Bon Appetit! Bon Appetit is not a bad game. It's got some really good ideas. It's made by a single person. It's a cool little game. I've actually got 11 hours in Bon Appetit, and it's had a big update since I last played it. I made a map for Bon Appetit, and the dev dropped an expansion, essentially, to the game. I just haven't had the time to go back through and update my map. So my map's still from version 1 of the game as opposed to whatever this one is. It's got some odd, quirky ideas and an interesting style, and certainly an interesting sense of humour. If you are on the lookout for a Metroidvania that's just a little bit odd, Bon appetit might float your boats. Speaking of games that are odd and might float your boats, Carrion. I really enjoyed Carrion. Carrion is not a long game. And some people might find Carrion incredibly annoying because it does not have an in-game map, which makes it oddly difficult to navigate at times. There are environmental things in the game to help you navigate, but they're not super obvious. Carrion's a horror game. It's a horror Metroidvania where you actually play the monster and you go around in an incredibly fluid, monstrous way, just tearing doors off hinges and tearing people to bits. It's a really fun experience. It's not very long. If you can find it on sale, highly recommend Carrion. I also highly recommend actually playing it with a mouse and keyboard, which is not something that I'd recommend for most Metroidvanias. It does play fine on a controller as well, but I quite liked playing it on mouse and keyboard. It felt good to me. It's a novel one, short, grisly, but very enjoyable in my opinion. Ooh, Castlevania Order of Ecclesia is the first of the actual kind of Castlevania Metroidvanias on this list. And I have always really loved Order of Ecclesia. I played it first on the Nintendo DS when it came out. I've played it a couple of times now on emulation as well. I even made a map for it. Was it last year? Might have been last year, year before. Of all of the handheld ones, the handheld Castlevania games, Order of Ecclesia is my favourite. But it is a little bit more hub-based than some of them. And therefore, if you want a kind of whole map style Castlevania game on the handhelds, Order of Ecclesia actually isn't a good example of that, but it's a really fun game and it pushes the hardware quite a lot as well. Castle in the Darkness. I couldn't tell you anything about. I don't remember it at all. According to Steam, I've played 67 minutes and I've got the achievement for dying 10 times and killing a boss and finding an item, and that's it. I couldn't, unfortunately, tell you anything about Castle in the Darkness. Last played July the 25th, 2015. So, didn't leave an impression on me, I am afraid. This was Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow. No, Aria of Sorrow. Aria of Sorrow was the one on the Game Boy Advance, I think. I can't remember off the top of my head. In fact, let's fill out all of the various Castlevania games on this tier list just before I continue. There we go. Some of you might have watched me do that and thought, holy crap, he's put Symphony of the Night below Dawn of Sorrow and Order of Ecclesia. Yes, I have. I like Symphony of the Night. I like Symphony of the Night a great deal, but I think it is incredibly overrated. For me, it is on a par with Aria, and it's on a par with Portrait of Ruin. Portrait of Ruin is a bit more difficult than you might remember if you played it when you were younger, like I did. I played it through last year and was quite surprised that it was trickier than I remember. Of the kind of Castlevania Metroidvanias, I think Dawn of Sorrow and Order of Ecclesia are the two best. They're the two most interesting. They're the two that I've played the most time of. Symphony of the Night is the one that I've played the most. Circle of the Moon is the one that I've played the least. I think I've had 2 full run-throughs of Circle of the Moon. Harmony of Dissonance it's all right. It's not a bad game. In fact, yeah, that makes more sense to me. Harmony of Dissonance and Circle of the Moon aren't bad games at all. Harmony of Dissonance is ugly. Circle of the Moon is surprisingly tricky and very stiff. That was their first kind of post-Symphony of the Night's attempt to mesh Castlevania with a Metroidvania-style playthrough. And yeah, it's got some good ideas, but it's very, very stiff to play. I think, though I reserve the right, as always, to change any of these around should I desire, I think that's roughly where I would place the various Castlevania games. Cathedral. I was really late to Cathedral. I heard about it. I heard it had got some interesting ideas, and I just never played it. And then I did play it for 32 hours, and I really enjoyed it. And I made a map of it because I really enjoyed it. Cathedral's going up there. Cathedral's going straight into B. No doubt about that. Really enjoyed Cathedral eventually. It's the actual map of Cathedral is the in-game map of Cathedral is ugly. It's very ugly. It is yeah. Let's just quickly bring up my version of the Cathedral map. It's an interesting one because it's got two layers. It's got an inside and an outside. And as you can see, this is one of the old ones. It still doesn't look great actually. It's a fairly substantial game, is Cathedral. But yeah, it's got an inside and an outside, and it all links up. And I found it oddly difficult to play at times and explore at times. But once you get into the rhythm of it, Cathedral's a good one. Cathedral is enjoyable. It's not easy. It's a challenging retro game. So just know that before you pick it up. But you'll get some good playtime out of Cathedral, in my opinion. Cat Maze. I couldn't tell you much about Cat Maze, unfortunately. I have got, according to Steam, I've got 1 minute of playtime. Last played in 2018. So yeah, couldn't tell you much about Cat Maze at all. Cave Story Plus is a game that everybody raves about. For good reason. It is a really solid Metroidvania, and it goes straight into the B tier without any thoughts on my part. Is it the longest game? No, but it's got a lot of things to find. It's got a lot of secrets, and I'm pretty certain Cave Story Plus is one of those games that has a very substantial speedrunning community to it. It is, I think many people would argue, a classic of the genre, and if you haven't tried Cave Story, I think a lot of people would say you kind of owe it to yourself as a fan of the genre to give it a go. It's not going to be for everybody though. I mean, you could say that about all the games on the list, but Cave Story is, it's got some quirks to it, especially if you come from a more melee focused Metroidvania background, because Cave Story is not. Curse of the Sea Rats is a game that I backed on Kickstarter. It's going straight in at D. I really wanted it to be good. I played the demo and thought, this is a little bit meh. I finished the full game. The full game's a little bit meh as well. It's got beautiful animations. And that's kind of it. It's got some... It just feels like it needed another 12 months of just polishing up and tightening up and some play testing with people that play these kinds of games that could say, yeah, this doesn't feel fun. It is stiff. It is, yeah. I mean, I've got 19.3 hours played, but that includes multiple playthroughs as I tried to get my map for the game sorted. But there were multiple bugs at launch. This is one of the more recent games that I've played, so it's not a bad game. It's not so bad that I didn't finish it, but there are far better. There are far better games that I could recommend for you to play other than Curse of the Sea Rats, unless you are really nostalgic for games that look like, you know, the Saturday morning cartoons of the late 80s, early 90s. Yeah, I wanted it to be good, but it's mediocre at best. Cursed Castilla. I've got 52 minutes in this game. I couldn't tell you a single thing about it. Just looking at it on my other monitor, it looks quite a lot like a Ghouls and Ghosts style thing. But yeah, I couldn't tell you squat about Cursed Castilla. Dark Devotion. Dark Devotion is an interesting one because whilst it is kind of technically a Metroidvania, it's also kind of technically a roguelite in the sense that you can't go backwards. You make your way down through the map, through the various room choices, but you can't go back to rooms that you were in previously. It's an odd design, it's an odd choice, and yet it works oddly well. Is it the best Metroidvania out there? No. Is it the best roguelike out there? No. But it's got good atmosphere to it. I've got 52.9 hours in Dark Devotion. I've got a map several maps actually that I produced for Dark Devotion. I think they're probably a bit out of date at this point, and the developers have moved on to other projects, including the latest one, which I haven't played. Although I've got a copy of it. Astral Ascent, I think it is. I think those are the same devs. Dark Devotion's an interesting one, and is very much one that I won't say that I give a big recommendation to, because I think realistically it's one that you should probably try for yourself. It is definitely not going to be for everybody, but I quite liked it. Dark Light. Dark Light is a game that I haven't finished. And I haven't finished it not because I've been distracted or because it's not out yet. I've not finished it because I don't think it's very fun. It could get better, but every time I've tried to pick it up and play it, I've got bored very quickly. The story just isn't there. The level design there's some really interesting things to look at. It's got this really kind of cyberpunky look to it, but it's just not fun to play, in my opinion, which is a real shame because there's a lot to like in terms of what they're going for. It's just not worked for me at all. I've got, all of 78 minutes in the kind of current version of Dark Light, but it was in early access for a long time, and it just feels like it needs more work. I mean, the last time I played it constantly hitched. This was back in October 2022. The game hitched constantly. It's like I'm using a 3090 here, and at the time I was using a pretty decent i7 processor as well. Whether it would still hitch on my current rig, I don't know, but I just don't feel inspired to go back to it. So again, Dark Light's sitting on the kind of tossed aside or unfinished pile at this point. Unlike Death's Gambit Afterlife. Ooh, where does that go? Death's Gambit Afterlife can go in B. Death's Gambit Afterlife is a rework of the original Death's Gambit, which has improved it dramatically and made it a lot more entertaining. It is, however, a Souls-like Metroidvania, which is not going to be for everybody. I quite enjoyed it and was quite active in the Death's Gambit Discord community for quite some time. I made a series of maps for Death's Gambit. The devs did update the game. Some things have changed. I must admit, I have not updated every single one of my maps. I keep meaning to go back to it, but it's quite a big game, and it's really soulsy. It's really soulsy. And if you don't like the difficulty of Souls-like games, you are not going to enjoy Death's Gambit. But the art style is great, the exploration's great. There's lots of really interesting things in Death's Gambit. But if you don't like Souls games, if you don't like FromSoft games, you're not going to like it. So I did like it. Not enough to put it like really high up, but enough to slot it into the B rank. I can tell you now that B rank's going to be a busy rank by the end of this list. Dust: An Elysian Tale. I've got 9 hours in Dust: Elysian Tale, but I last played it in 2013. So I can't say I remember a great deal about it, but I can tell you I enjoyed it. I can tell you it was good. And I seem to recall, I think it was Dust that was made by a very small team, possibly even one person. It is a game full of anthropomorphic animal characters, if I remember correctly. So if you are very, and I hate to use this phrase because, you know, I might get some backlash for it, but if you are anti-furry as a kind of worldview, don't think you're going to get a lot from Dust, but it's actually really enjoyable. There's some good exploration. Combat's done well. It is, yeah. And just from what I can remember, as I said, it's been a decade at this point. It's a solid game. One to try for yourself, I think. Eldorand, one of the more recent ones. I've got 13.4 hours according to Steam in this. I've 100%ed the game. Eldorand is a really solid game. I think Eldorand's going to go in C rather as well. It's got a great style to it. It's got a good feel to it that kind of places it in a similar kind of vein to Symphony of the Night, actually, in terms of, you know, how it feels. It's slightly more difficult than Symphony. It's not the biggest game world. The game itself can probably be completed in 5 or 6 hours, I would think, which isn't a bad thing because a lot of Metroidvania games are on the quote unquote shorter side. It's a really good effort. It's got some quirks to it, but it's a really good effort. I really enjoyed it. The graphic style was good. The boss design was interesting. There were multiple endings from what I can remember. The story was pretty okay. Weirdly enough, there's character creation, so you can customize the look of your character, which, considering it's pixel art, is interesting. Yeah, it's a really solid game with some interesting kind of almost Lovecraftian leanings to it. And if that's your kind of thing, you know, it's not a Lovecraftian game. You're not going to run into great old ones or anything like that, but it's got a little bit of that kind of idea behind it. So, yeah, Eldorand C, I think, is a fair place for that. Ender Lilies. Loved Ender Lilies. 58.9 hours played of Ender Lilies on Steam. It's beautiful. It's challenging. It's got some weird quirks. It's got a not particularly great in-game map. It does, however, have a really good map made from screenshots by that Demajen. Oh no, that's me, isn't it? Yeah, I made a very involved guide for Ender Lilies where I went and screenshotted every single room in the game and stitched it together into a map of every zone. That is one of my most popular maps, and Ender Lilies actually is one of the most popular Metroidvania games available on Steam. It is really good. It's really good, and once again, I do really recommend the soundtrack. If I'm feeling when I'm trying to create something, if I feel like I need something sad tone-wise, I will put the Ender Lily soundtrack on. It's a beautiful game with an oddly touching, sad story. The combat isn't for everybody. The game actually isn't for everybody. It does lean quite heavily into the difficulty, which doesn't necessarily match with the kind of graphical ideals of it. But it's an interesting setting, quite dark, quite gothic and dystopian. I can't recommend Ender Lilies enough, but I imagine if you're looking for recommendations for Metroidvanias, I imagine you've probably already played Ender Lilies, because it's one of those games that everybody recommends. Apparently, we're 40 minutes into this recording. Oh boy, we're not even halfway through yet. This is going to be a long video. Let's get on with it. Environmental Station Alpha is a game that comes highly recommended by everybody. And whenever I ask about Metroidvania games, everybody says, have you tried Environmental Station Alpha? I have not. I have it. I own it. I have never booted it up. I'm of the opinion that this arguably makes me a bad person, considering the kind of general ravings about Environmental Station Alpha. But no, I've never played it. I keep meaning to, and I'm not a person that's got a lot of time, and I've never got around to it. People keep telling me it's really good. If there is an older Metroidvania game that I haven't played, it's one of the things that really gets me to play them is, has anybody created a map for it yet? And if they haven't, then I'm more likely to play it. There's a load of guides out there for Environmental Station Alpha. I've just not done it. Sorry. I hear it's very good. I haven't played it. Game that I have played is Escape from Tethys, and I really enjoyed Escape from Tethys. Is it the longest game? No, I got through it in about just under 6 hours. I could probably have got I could have probably got through it quicker than that, but I really enjoyed Escape from Tethys. It's very old school. It's very Metroid. It's arguably not a Metroidvania in the classic sense. It's more a Metroid style game. It's got, an alien planet, it's got shooting, and it's fun. It's really fun, and it's got really catchy music. So if you haven't tried Escape from Tethys, I highly recommend it. It's not, as I said, super long, and it's not particularly expensive either, from what I remember. Yeah, you can get it for like £4. So if you haven't tried Escape from Tethys, I do highly recommend it. Exorcist Fairy. I really wanted, when I first started playing Exorcist Fairy, to be able to recommend it to people. It's got great artwork. It looks really good. But it's very derivative of other games. And about 3/4 of the way through, the game takes an absolute nosedive in terms of quality and fun. And the translation into English is bad for most of the game, but especially towards the end. It's baffling how it was put together, and it just feels massively unfinished. It is playable. You can complete the entire game. Whether you will come away feeling satisfied by it is another matter entirely, because yeah. Interesting aside about Exorcist Fairy, I started recording a series for YouTube when I could be bothered to actually record my playthroughs of Metroidvanias and put them out, but very few people watch them. They're more interested in the maps that I've made, which I get. I started recording the series for Exorcist Fairy, and I discovered that I got like 2 episodes in, and then all of the other episodes were copyright claimed because apparently the developers had just downloaded songs and music from the internet to use and not actually licensed any of it. So it's like I couldn't be bothered to edit together videos for that. It just wasn't good enough for that kind of experience. So you can play it. It's all right. It's competent, if derivative. It's not winning any awards for story or translation. Pheromonium. There was a time when I would have put Pheromonium down in D, but I'm not going to. I'm going to put it at the lower end of C. Pheromonium is a hand-drawn Metroidvania about fears and phobias, and it's got quite an interesting, if I must admit, a little bit predictable of a story. And at launch, it was not great. It was all right, but it would have very much been at the lower end of this list. Arguably on one of the lowest ends of this list. One of the issues that I had, and that a lot of people had, the feedback for this was quite overwhelming, was that the combat felt bad, wrong. The reach that the character had wasn't good. There was contact damage, so it just felt really, really off. But the thing is, changing stuff like that when you've got all hand-drawn artwork for your character is a lot of work. And with all due respect to the developer, they went and did it. They redrew all of the sprites for the main character to extend the hitbox. That is dedication to your game and user experience. It's still not an amazing Metroidvania, but it's now a very playable, very interesting, well done, competent Metroidvania, and I have to give them props for that. Just looking at the Steam page, apparently the game was updated in January this year. New languages, boss battle balance, impact from attacks. I actually hadn't seen that they'd updated this. Changed the behaviour of some mobs, changed the arrangements of mobs on some levels, changed the way some abilities are used. I actually didn't know that this was a thing. Maybe if I've got time, I'll go back and I'll give it another go. But yeah, I've got 16 hours in Pheromonium, and it's definitely a better feeling game now than it was at launch. So if you like stories about mental health, essentially, fears, it's got a really nice kind of almost a Cuphead style art style. So if that's your cup of tea, then maybe check Pheromonium out. It's not going to blow your socks off in the way that some of the higher ups on this list will do, but it's competent and it's entertaining. Feudal Alloy. 13 hours in Feudal Alloy. Yeah. Feudal Alloy goes in C. It's an interesting idea. It strikes me as very kind of Monty Python animation-esque inspired. It's got some decent exploration, a decent map, some decent humour. It is decent, and I think that's why it's going in C. It is competent, and there's very little about it that stands out, except the art style. It's good. It's good. I enjoyed Feudal Alloy. I enjoyed some of the little absurdities. I enjoyed the fact that you're playing a goldfish in a mech suit, essentially. I wasn't a massive fan of the overheating oil mechanic. I can't remember what it actually was or what it was called, but I remember it's essentially a stamina bar. And I just... the feel of it at times really frustrated me. But it was not super detrimental to the entire experience. So, yeah, that goes there. I'm trying to speed up a little bit here, because otherwise this video is going to be like 2 hours long. Fist Forged and Shadow Touch. An easy leap up into A. Fist Forged in Shadow Torch is arguably the best 2.5D Metroidvania. I might counteract that later on. In fact, I'm going to counteract it straight away. It's the second best 2.5D Metroidvania, but it's really, really good. It's the best 2.5D non-Souls-like Metroidvania. There we go. That'll work for you. Why have I got Grime twice on this list? I've just realised down here. That's annoying. We'll sort that out. Yeah, Fist is... It's just really good. It's a big game. It's got generally well-written personalities. It's got great mechanics and zones to explore. The voice acting is a little bit cheesy at times, but you don't get a lot of dialogue in the game. To be honest, the only thing that prevents Fist from getting into S rank for me is the combo fighting style system. It's got like kind of fighting game mechanics to it, which for 99.9% of the game you don't need until you have to do the challenges for 100% in the game, and that niggled me. It was just a little bit unnecessary, but otherwise Fist Forged in Shadow Torch, really good. I've only got 5.5 hours on it on Steam, but that's because I played the PlayStation 5 version, PS4 version. I do not remember off the top of my head how long it took me to beat the game, but it's a sizable one. I'm fairly certain it was around 20 odd hours for my first playthrough. Fist is really, really good. It's smooth. It plays great. It's just received, well, I say just, last year it received DLSS 3 support on the PC. So if you've got a 40 series graphics card, it ran really smooth on a 3090. So with ray tracing on, if I remember, it's an Unreal Engine game, and it's really good. Really, really good. Ghost Song. Oh man, Ghost Song. I'm going to have to put it right towards the lower end of B. I really, really wanted to enjoy Ghost Song more than I did, but my first playthrough of Ghost Song was ruined by a couple of not great design choices. The game is good. It's really good. In fact, it's excellent if you know to do a certain couple of things. So let me tell you what those things are. In Souls games, it is in your best interest to talk to NPCs multiple times until they start repeating their dialogue and exhaust it. In Ghost Song, you have to do that. You have to do that every time you return a new ship part and move on the day. If you don't, if you miss one, if you don't realise that you've got to do that, you will not get the best Ghost Song experience. Ghost Song's strengths are its story, its characters, its interactions with those characters. And unfortunately, you might not realise that until it's too late. And that really bummed me out. Really, really bummed me out. I've got 8.6 hours on Steam for Ghost Song, and I think I played it on... Did I play it on Game Pass as well? It's got some really, really charming moments. It's got some really, really quality writing, but too much of it is too easy to miss. And if you miss things, the ending is going to feel really anticlimactic. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that the game has ramping difficulty and levels. So if you, like I did on the first playthrough, return multiple ship parts in rapid succession, the game can actually really quickly outscale you and make it incredibly difficult and incredibly tedious. So pace yourself out with the returning of ship parts, explore places, upgrade, level up. Because if you return things too quickly, It does the Souls thing if you're losing currency and you need to repair yourself when you die, and it's a tad frustrating, but there's so much charm in the characters and the story, it is worth playing for that alone. Grime. S tier. Grime is the best as far as I can think of 2.5D Metroidvania. Is it a Souls-like game? Yes. Does that mean that it's not going to be for everybody's taste? Absolutely. Grime, I've got many hours out of. I'm up at 81 hours for Grime on Steam, but I've also got a couple of dozen hours on the GOG version of the game as well. Grime is excellent. It's weird. It's got some really bizarre ideas. It is, and I hope the devs don't mind me saying this if they watch this, because I talk to the devs fairly regularly on their Discord. It's a little bit janky in places. The Colours of Rot DLC expanded the story and the game world in an interesting and dramatic way. I know that they have got the Tinge of Terror DLC, which includes a very interesting New Game Plus experience, which I don't think I'm allowed to talk about yet. No, I'm fairly certain I can't, so I'm not going to. But it's interesting, let me say that. Grime's great value for money, and if you like your Souls like Metroidvanias, you would be remiss if you didn't try it for yourself. Guacamelee and Guacamelee 2. Guacamelee 2. I feel that Guac 2 is the superior title, but they are both really silly, really fun games. The number of references and in-jokes in them is... If you've got my kind of sense of humour, you will love these games. They are not super expensive. They actually have, I think, couch co-op. I don't recall if they've got online co-op, but they're really good fun. I've got 15 hours in Guac 1, Super Turbo Championship Edition. I've got almost 19 hours in Guac 2. They are fun. They are challenging at times. They are very funny and very silly if you've got the sense of humour for them. I cannot recommend these two games enough, and I suspect there's probably a bundle for them as well. Hack. Hack is also going up in B. It is not for everybody, is Hack, but in terms of the fluidity of movement, Hack is one of the better Metroidvania games that I've played. The only issue I have with Hack is that I played so much of it and gave so much feedback for it in early access that I've burnt myself out really badly with the game. I've got 98.1 hours in Hack. I've just finished updating my maps for its second-ish big DLC, Echo of Chains, which really expanded the final area in the game. It's got an interesting art style. It's got great movement. Its story is interestingly told. It's very world map based in terms of its Metroidvania, and it kind of feels like it's in some ways a story in progress. So if you want a complete, finished, climaxed story, arguably I don't feel like it's necessarily going to be there for you in Hack, but they're working on more stuff. So it's almost episodic. I believe there's a mobile version as well that you can actually download the chapters for. I don't really know how it works because I've got the PC version, but it's one to check out for yourself, is Hack, because it's good, and it's good in kind of weird and odd ways. I do very much recommend it, but I need a break from it. Haiku the Robot, made by Mr. Morris Games. Really fun game. Haiku is great. It's a really good game. It is somewhat derivative of Hollow Knight, but it's fun. Is it the longest game? No, I've got 18 hours in Haiku the Robot, but that is 2 full playthroughs of the base game and one full playthrough of the really aggravating for me, because I don't like hardcore Iron Mask style challenge. Hardcore mode, what's it called? Corrupt mode. I cheated my way through that. I've got no problems with admitting that. I don't like kind of one life modes. I did exactly the same thing with Hollow Knight. And yet I still feel like I had fun with it and I got my value out of it. And if you want to laugh at me for it, well, yeah, okay, I had fun still. There's nothing that I can really say negative for Haiku the Robots. It's just a little bit derivative of Hollow Knight, but for a one-man effort, it's really, really good, and I do recommend it. And to be honest, if I was going to reorder these in terms of, you know, rank, it's very much towards the top of the tier, as is Hack, to be honest. But I'm not going to reorder them because that's I'm too lazy. I'm too lazy for that. Headlander. Headlander's silly. I've got 8.7 hours in Headlander, and I really enjoyed playing it. It's not the most amazing Metroidvania. It's got some humour that's going to fall flat for a lot of people, but I really like the kind of psychedelic 60s/70s vibe in space for this. Headlander is a game about you control a head. And you can attach yourself to various bodies to solve the puzzles and get through the right doors and so on and so forth. It's weird. It's weird, and it's not going to be for everybody, but if it lands with your sense of humour, yeah, I think you'll enjoy this one. I managed to 100% it in 8.7 hours. Didn't do a map for this one, but I do recommend Headlander. The more I think about it, and even just looking at the achievements and the screenshots on my second monitor, it's like, yeah, that's a silly good time. So try Headlander for yourself. Hell yeah, Wrath of the Dead Rabbits. I don't think I finished this. In fact, I haven't finished it because I haven't got the achievement for finishing the game, Superior Completion Skills. I vaguely recall enjoying Hell yeah, but just kind of getting frustrated towards the end. And I must admit, I can't remember why. Maybe I'll go back to Hell yeah. Because I don't recall it being a bad game at all. But, yeah. Don't know. Hollow Knight. Terrible game. No. I'm not going to talk about Hollow Knight because why would I need to talk about Hollow Knight? You know, if you were looking at a Metroidvania rankings list, you have either played Hollow Knight or people have already told you to play Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight is a standard which has been set in some ways, which is quite unfortunate for other developers, because Hollow Knight was so big for the money that everybody now expects Metroidvanias to be 40 hours for 18 quid. Or whatever Hollow Knight was on release. I can't remember because I kickstarted it. I think that's a terrible standard to set. I think that is the only bad thing, arguably. Well, to be honest, I find Hollow Knight has quite a lot of niggles. But the one big negative for me is how so many people have put it up on a massive pedestal, and expect all other games to reach its heights. And I feel like Hollow Knight is in a similar position actually to Symphony of the Night at this stage. You know, Symphony of the Night is an excellent game, but it's overrated. And I honestly think that Hollow Knight is now in the same situation. It's an excellent game, but it is a little bit kind of overrated at this point. Everything gets compared to Hollow Knight, and I think that is unfair. You know, Blasphemous 2 was announced. Well, not announced, but there was a trailer for it a few days ago at the Nintendo Direct. And because it wasn't a trailer for Silksong, and because it wasn't more news for Silksong, it all got ignored. everybody seems to be Silk Song, Silk Song, Silk Song, to the detriment of every other Metroidvania title. It's that big, it's that popular a franchise. Silk Song's been 4 years since it announced now, and it's still not out. We still don't know even roughly when it's arriving. I hope Silk Song can live up to the hype, but at this stage, I just don't think it can. Moving on from this, because I don't want to talk about Hollow Knight anymore. Hunter X. Hunter X is made by the same people that made 3000th Duel. It's not as good as 3000th Duel, but it's all right. It's playable. It's finishable. It's got some interesting ideas, albeit quite generic. It's got some slightly odd 8-way dash movement tech, which feels a little bit weird. It's got an okay map. It is my definition of meh. It's all right. It's mediocre. It's playable if you can't think of any other Metroidvania to play. But it's meh. Iconoclasts. Oh, Iconoclast is a tricky one. There's a lot in Iconoclast that I really like. Yeah. I'm unsure on that one. Iconoclast is a game that I've got almost 30 hours in, and I back and forth about it all the time. It's got some really good Metroidvania elements. It's also got a really deep and philosophical story, which even now I am not entirely sure I understood. It's got some interesting characters introduced that are killed almost straight away. It's got some really characters that are introduced which stick around and survive. A lot of the characters actually are quite unlikable in Iconoclast, but I think that's kind of the point. I think it's a game about, putting people on pedestals and tearing them down. I played Iconoclast on stream back in 2018, I think it was, when I was still doing little bits of Twitch. And it's got some really, it's got great art, it's got great music, it's got some great ideas. I just have this lingering feeling of I didn't get it. Maybe because I was distracted and wasn't quite paying attention. I was too busy paying attention to, chat and stuff. But yeah, it's an interesting one, is Iconoclast. It's also quite old, so it's not one that people talk about very much anymore. Same goes actually for Insanely Twisted Shadow Planet, which came out on the Xbox 360 Game Pass. Can't remember. Never finished it. Interesting ideas. Didn't finish it. Got it on Steam as well. I've got 2.8 hours of it on Steam. I cannot remember why I didn't finish this, because I don't recall it being bad in any way, shape, or form. I just didn't. Again, probably a game that I should go back to at some point. Islets. C. Islets is all right. It's not a bad game by any shape of the stretch of the imagination. It's got nice art. It's got super chill music. It's got ever so slightly floaty controls, but actually it turns out that they work in the game's favour. Towards the end, it's got a decent sized map. The general kind of selling point of the game is actually that the maps are all separate islands, and as you go through the game, you'll actually combine those islands so that you can access different parts of the map in different ways. That's a nice little premise, a unique selling point to Islets. It's got a super chill story. I liked it. It's really nicely done. Small team, possibly one-man dev efforts. I can't remember. I didn't play it on Steam, so I can't remember how long I played it for, but it was good. I enjoyed it, and I recommend it. Islets. Karen's Crypt. Even death may die. I am in the process of playing this. I'm in the process of playing this because somebody asked me whether I'd made a map for it, and I had not. Unscripted is a top-down, almost Zelda style, like the old-fashioned Link's Awakening style, dungeon-based Metroidvania, with a really odd and interesting possession mechanic. It's weird, and it's quite fun. It's also quite difficult, which is why it's taking me some time. That and the fact that I'm doing a screenshot map of it for my sins. I believe there are 9 or 10 levels to this dungeon. So like 10 dungeons from a Zelda game. And yeah, it's weird. It's weird. And I if and when I finish the map for it, because it's a kind of back burner project, I might be able to say more about it. But for what I've played of it so far, it's unusual. How Metroidvania it is, I really couldn't tell you at this point because I've only made it down to level 3 so far. As I said, I haven't played a huge amount of it. I'm up to what, 4-ish hours, but I've been screenshotting things as I go. So, you know. Kunai, 18.8 hours for this. Kunai has got good movements, a really funky kind of art style and premise. You play a ninja tablet, basically, like a ninja iPad or something. It's got an odd setting. It's got cool graphics, very kind of two-tone palette-y style things, very almost Game Boy Color-esque, I want to say, but very much designed for modern hardware. I enjoyed Kunai. It's not the most memorable game. It's not really kind of stuck with me, but as I said, I played it for almost 19 hours and I got every single achievement and I made some maps for it. So it can't have been bad. Lamp Chronicle. As far as I know, Lamp Chronicle is dead. I've played 16 hours of Lamp Chronicle in early access, but the game hasn't been updated since January the 12th, 2022. The developers just seem to have completely disappeared. I have no idea if and when Lamp Chronicle will ever get finished, which is a real shame, actually, because what they had produced so far was going all right. They'd had some fairly significant feedback in the early access, and they were acting on it. They'd massively changed the map, they'd changed navigation, they'd changed save systems. It was all starting to look like it was shaping up, and then it all just dropped off the face of the earth. You can actually still buy Lamp Chronicle, but I don't think it'll ever get finished, so I don't think I can recommend you buying Lamp Chronicle. Unless you want to see a project that was starting to look really good and never got finished. I don't know. That's up to you and how much disposable income you have got. La Mulana and La Mulana 2 are classics, and I have not completed either of them. They're too hard for me and too frustrating. But I know that people rave about them, that they are supposed to be very, 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 very good indeed. I just haven't finished them. The Last Case of Benedict Fox isn't out yet. It's out in, 4 days from when I'm recording this video. I really enjoyed the demo of The Last Case of Benedict Fox, and I am therefore hoping that the full game is excellent, but I haven't played it yet, so I couldn't tell you. Lone Fungus. Is it the best looking Metroidvania on this list? Nope. But it is incredibly fun. It's very fun. It's very hard. It has probably the most active solo developer I have seen in my many years of playing Metroidvanias, let alone making maps for Metroidvanias. It's had like 12 patches, like one almost every single day since it was launched. Not for like game-breaking bugs, but for literal and little quality of life feedbacks and tweaks, feedback made by members of the community. It is very heartwarming to see. It's the game has a great map. It's got a lot of charm. It's got some really high skill stuff should you want to do it, but you don't have to do it. It's not essential to completing the game or even getting any of the endings as far as I can remember some of these challenges. But Lone Fungus is really, really good. It's got similar kinds of systems to Hollow Knight and Haiku the Robot. I'd argue that it's more expansive than Haiku, which is why it's bumped up to the next tier. I'd very much recommend Lone Fungus. I can't say I recommend Mabel in the Woods. I tried to play it. I put multiple hours into it. I gave some feedback on it. But yeah. I just didn't find that entertaining at all. And I got some exciting, not threats, but I got some exciting comments from members of that game's community ordering me to update my review of the game because the developer had patched things. It's like, well, I'm not changing my review. I wrote this is when I gave the review, and that the developers patched it since. But no, people were very vocal about the fact that I should update my review, which rankled me a bit, so I didn't. I left the comments on as well about how about people telling me to update it. Screw people like that. Metroid Zero Mission. It's a remake of Metroid 1 with extra bits. It's got some irritating hand-holding, which takes away from the game as a whole, but it still gets into my B listings because of that. Metroid Return of Samus, or the 3DS remake of Metroid 2, is solid. It's not amazing, but it's solid, and they did what they could with Metroid 2, which, to be honest, isn't a particularly amazing game. Super Metroid, one of my favourite Metroid games ever. I think it's right at the bottom of A. I think, just like Symphony of the Night, it's a little bit overrated, but it's still really, really good. Metroid Fusion is above Super Metroid. From again, these aren't in any massively particular order. I prefer Metroid Fusion to Super Metroid. I know not everybody does, but I do. I think Metroid Fusion is a more atmospheric and more interesting game than that. And Metroid Dread, I think, is better than any of them. Metroid Dread, I know, is a game that not everybody likes. They don't like the Emmys and so on and so forth. I really like Metroid Dread. It's not as good as Grime in terms of its 2.5D Metroidvania for me. Although it's smoother than Grime. It's got better animations than Grime. There's clearly a huge amount of care and attention being put into it. Metroid Dread, i.e. Metroid 5, is my favourite side-scrolly Metroidvania. No, my side-scrolling Metroidvania, if that makes sense to people, which it probably doesn't, because I've been recording for, an hour and 20 minutes almost at this point. Let's keep on going after a drink. Mind Seas. Mind Seas is a Metroid-like. I've got 29 hours in Mind Seas. It is good. Is it amazing? No. Is it super long? No. That 29 hours is based on multiple playthroughs. It was a bit janky when it was janky. That was not an accent. It was a bit janky when it was released. Was Mind Seas? It's been patched and buffed, and it's now a really good sci-fi Metroidvania with some nice pixel art, some nice kind of in-game cutscene style things. It is a solid choice. Is it going to blow your socks off? No. Is it going to keep you busy for 40 hours? Definitely not. But for what it is, it's really fun. And it does also have one of my favourite power-ups in a Metroidvania, which is the infinite slide move, which Hack also has. So that's well worth it, in my opinion. Minoria. I'm going to be honest. I've got 8 hours in Minoria. I finished the game, but I couldn't tell you whether I enjoyed it or not. I kind of feel like I didn't. Very much. I seem to recall it being frustratingly challenging. And not in a good way. Same goes for Momodora Reverie Under the Moonlight, which I've got no achievements in, and I've got 3.3 hours in Momodora. I never finished it. It's not fun. It felt unfair. So I did finish Minoria, and it was rough. But Momodora never made any progress in. Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom. I had to check that. Got 20 odd hours in Monster Boy. Completed it. Didn't enjoy it. It looks great. It sounds great. Combat was shit. I really did not enjoy the combat. It was incredibly frustrating, but everything else about the game was really good. It's just that Metroidvanias kind of live and die on their exploration and combat, and because the combat was so bad, it dragged it down. If the combat had been good, it would have been up in B tier easily, but the combat was not good. The combat was not good at all. Hitboxes were off, contact damage was ridiculous. It just was not fun for me. So, meh. Big fat meh to Monster Boy. Moonscars, on the other hand, very much not for everybody, but definitely a game for me. I've got 8.4 hours on Moonscars according to Steam, but I didn't originally play it on Steam, so that's why that number is off. I'm fairly certain it's close to probably 20 or so hours. Moonscars is good. It's got a really interesting visual style. It's got an expansive map. It's got an oddly deep Souls-like storyline. It's also got fairly Soulsy combat. It is a game that some people are not going to like because of the challenge of combat. It is a game that some people are not going to like because of the aesthetic. I know there were a lot of people that complained about the readability of the map to the extent the developers actually completely redid the map. For me, they actually made it look a little bit less interesting and characterful, but there is no denying that they made it easier to read. So, yeah. Moonscars is good. It is a very solid Metroidvania experience. This next choice is going to annoy some people. The Mummy Demastered is one of my favourite Metroidvania experiences. Realistically, is it better than Super Metroid and Metroid Dread and Metroid Fusion and Bloodstained? No. So why is it up there? Because it has, I'm pretty certain it holds the record for Metroidvania game that I have replayed the most out of any of the games on this list. I'm up to 8, possibly even 9 replayings of The Mummy Demastered. It is just fun as far as I'm concerned. It's not super long. It is tight. It's well delivered. It works. It's a different game now to what it was when it was released. Actually, shall I be fairer? Shall I be fair and bring it down to A? Maybe I should. Maybe I should, just for the pure kind of recommendations. Well, let's put it there. It is nevertheless one of my favourite Metroidvania games. It takes a lot of the things from the Metroid games and the classic Symphony of the Night kind of or handheld Castlevania games, and it puts its own spin on them to fit in with the kind of feature film tie-in. It's way better than the film that it was the tie-in for. It's a really good-looking game featuring art from, I believe, the same people that did some of the pixel art in Blasphemous. It's just a really high-quality title, in my opinion, and it is always at the top of my, if you like Metroidvanias and you haven't played The Mummy Demastered, play The Mummy Demastered. I feel kind of bad not putting it in S tier, if I'm honest. Dallas the Dark Call. Is it Call? I think it's Call. I have got 8.3 hours in Dallas the Dark Call, and I could not tell you a single thing about it. I don't remember playing it. I've got 22 out of 29 achievements. I played it in 2017. I don't know if I finished it. I've completed 100% of the game in normal mode. Yeah, apparently I did complete it. So that goes in D. Just because I literally couldn't tell you anything about it. It was utterly unmemorable. Likewise, Omega Strike, utterly unmemorable. I played it. I've got 10 hours in it. I've 100%ed all the achievements in it. But there was nothing about it that stands out that I could recommend for it. As opposed to Ori and the Blind Forest, which goes into A for me with no real difficulty whatsoever, and Ori and the Will of the Wisp, which most definitely goes up into the S tier by improving upon everything in Ori and the Blind Forest in pretty much every way. As far as I'm concerned, they're both beautiful games. They've got moving stories. They've got moving soundtracks, which I still listen to. Well done, Gareth Coker, for that. In fact, they introduced me to his work. The Ori games are excellent. Do you need to play the first one in order to play the second one? I would probably say yes. I know not everybody would, but I would argue that you probably should play Blind Forest because you'll appreciate Will of the Wisp so much more from a narrative perspective and from a just general improvements that they made to the game perspective to get there. I'm not going to say much more about the Ori games because they're already quite popular. Outbuddies DX is also quite popular. I never finished it. How much Outbuddies have I played? 2.4 hours of Outbuddies. Didn't get very far. I hear it's pretty decent. I can't say I didn't enjoy it. I was unenthused by it. Outland. Outland is a game that I quite like. Outland. It's got an interesting colour switching mechanic. It's quite an old game. It came out on the Xbox years ago. I last played it on the PC in 2015 and didn't really play very much of it at all. But I seem to recall I completed it on the Xbox. Might have been the 360. Can't remember. Outland was decent. I couldn't tell you a lot about it. That's pretty much all I remember about it. But yeah, it had got decent music. It's made by Housemarque. Aren't they the people that made Returnal? Or was that somebody else? Don't know. Can't remember. But yeah, Outland was okay from what little I can remember about it. Out There Somewhere. I don't think I've played. No, apparently I've played 28 minutes of Out There Somewhere. Couldn't tell you a damn thing about it. And actually, and this is, according to some people, sacrilegious, Owlboy is a game that I never finished either. I did not enjoy Owlboy. It got some really nice pixel art, and that's pretty much all I could tell you about it. I just didn't think it was as fun as everybody was hyping it up to be. I just couldn't be bothered finishing it. Everybody says, yeah, Owlboy is really good if you like Metroidvanias. Maybe it is. I played 6 hours, got 2 achievements, haven't played it, touched it since 2018. So it's not for... Maybe it's for most people, but it wasn't for me. In fact, Pharaoh Rebirth, I had more enjoyment with. Did I finish Pharaoh Rebirth? I'm not sure. It's got good pixel art, got some interesting ideas. I don't think I finished it. No, I don't think I finished it. So for consistency, let's put it down in the unfinished thing. Pharaoh Rebirth is one that I do recommend you try. I don't know why I didn't finish it. I cannot remember. But it was a decent Metroidvania. Project Colonies is in early access. It's not finishable yet, and therefore it's going down here. It's rough around the edges at the moment. They're going for a Metroid Dread 2.5D style thing, but they're nowhere near it yet. More on that to come at some later point. Pronti, going well up into the A. It's an underwater Metroidvania, so you can move in whichever direction you want. Still 2.5D, so, but you can go all over the place. Really enjoyable. There's one boss fight towards the end of the game, the Hellish Rabbit, which I think is kind of badly designed, and it soured my experience towards the end of the game to the extent, actually, that I can't remember whether I finished releasing my videos on it, because I think I was a little bit sweary and mean about that boss design. I don't necessarily like being hypercritical of things, but I was really pissed off with the ending of that. But generally speaking, Pronti is a fabulous game. Cycron, really solid mini Metroid game. It's not a Metroidvania, really. It's very Metroid. It's very short. You can complete it in 3 to 4 hours, but it's good. It's really good. It's cheap. It's good value for money. Yeah, I like Cycron. I made a map for Cycron. Deedlit. Record of Lost War, Deedlit and Wonder Labyrinth. Probably the longest title of any game on the list. Not played it. It's supposed to be very Symphony of the Night-like, and I just haven't played it. It looks good in the screenshots. It looks good in the video. The soundtrack sounds excellent. I've just never drummed up the enthusiasm to play it. And likewise, Sultan Sanctuary. You know, it's the Souls-like Metroidvania that everybody tells you to play, and I have not. I've got 65 minutes in Deedlit in Wonder Labyrinth, and Sultan Sanctuary, I've got 3 hours, last played in 2019. It's just got no interest for me. So I've never completed it. As opposed to Shadow Complex, which is going straight in at B for me with very little thought. I love Shadow Complex. It was one of the games that got me into kind of the more modern day Metroidvanias. It's the first, as far as I'm aware, 2.5D Metroidvania. It's got super cheesy dialogue. Kids these days would probably describe it as cringe, but I'm in my 40s. I really enjoyed Shadow Complex when it first came out. I don't have a huge amount of time on it on the Steam version. About 3 hours, not finished it. Did start actually recording a series on it, never released it. Shadow Complex is good, kind of corny fun. It's not a super long game, but for developers trying to do something a little bit different, it works quite well. And the foam gun is great fun. The Shantae games, let's go through these in actual order of release for the ones that I've got. Risky's Revenge, I don't think is great. If I'm honest, it's all right. I've played it. According to this, I don't think I've actually... No, I have finished Risky's Revenge. I just haven't finished this particular version of it. It's all right. It's very, very old, and you can tell. Pirate's Curse, very easily going up to the B tier. Pirate's Curse is a really, really good Metroidvania. In fact, it kind of cemented Shantae's place in the Metroidvania genre. So, very much worth playing. Half Genie Hero is all right. Is it a great Metroidvania? Arguably no, because it's level-based and because it actually doesn't have an in-game map. but it's still better than some of these other games in the list, if a little bit easy. Seven Sirens, actually, I also place up in the B tier. It was really too easy at launch, but it is much better after they rebalanced it. It's got good graphics, it's got a really nice hand-drawn style, it's got the typical slightly over-sexualized Shantae style. I like it. As a game, not I like the over-sexualized style. I enjoyed Shantae. I've played it through 4 times now. On the iPad twice and on the PC as well. Song of the Deep, I did not finish. I couldn't tell you why I didn't finish it. I played 3.5 hours for it. I liked the music. I liked the style. It just didn't hold my attention for whatever reason. Soldiers is a game that I really want to be able to put higher up, but I cannot. I'm going to be generous and put Soldiers in the C tier, but I don't really think it deserves it for a variety of reasons. It's got great pixel art, great music, great ideas, and some bloody awful ideas as well. Ideas which still weren't taken on board. The developers put out a massive balance patch, probably at some point in the middle of last year, and it just decimated the difficulty of the game. Rather than doing what they should have done, which is taking a look at people's feedback and taking on board the critique of the systems that they designed and fixing them, they just saw people giving massive amounts of negative reviews saying the game was too hard, and they just nerfed the difficulty across the board. So now the game is really easy, but all of the things for me that made it irritating are still there. It's just so easy now that you don't really need to worry about them, which is a shame. If you want a really big value for money in terms of time spent Metroidvania that looks great and sounds great and is just kind of easy to play and coast through, Soldiers is brilliant. If you're looking for a game that has really well-designed systems and things that won't niggle you, yeah. I wrote a review on Soldiers, if I remember correctly. I've played a lot of it. You know, I've got 63 hours in Soldiers. But I cannot put my hand on heart and say I recommend it. As I said, my review on Soldiers, if I remember, I'll link it down in the description below because I think it'll tell you my position on the game. Steam Dolls still isn't out. Still isn't out. They've been developing Steam Dolls for a long time. I think I kickstarted it like half a dozen years ago. It's still not out. They're still working on it. It's probably going to be okay, but we're nowhere near at this point seeing what is going on. The publishers have actually stepped in and started to take over communication with the backers at this point because it's taking so long. SteamWorld Dig. Yeah, I think I can put SteamWorld Dig in C tier. The original SteamWorld Dig. It's nowhere near as good as SteamWorld Dig 2, which definitely goes up in the B tier for me. SteamWorld Dig 2 is an evolution of the original game, and I really enjoyed it. SteamWorld Dig, the original, I've got 13 and a bit hours in. SteamWorld Dig 2, I've got 43.5 hours in. Multiple playthroughs of SteamWorld Dig 2. You can actually find my first playthrough of SteamWorld Dig 2 on my YouTube channel. I streamed it on Twitch to, I think, 0 people. Because, of course, there was nobody watching me back then. And, you know, this was back in, what, 2017? Something like that. According to Steam, I last played it this year, and I did. I didn't play the game through. I logged in and pulled out some things that I needed to check. SteamWorld Dig 2 is a really, really good game. I'm really hoping that they make a SteamWorld Dig 3 at some point, but the SteamWorld devs have diversified into deck builders, and I think they're doing a city management sim next. So they're going interesting ways, but SteamWorld Dig 2 is fun, it's fluid, it's expansive. I highly recommend it. I also recommend Strider, which is quite old these days. Last played in 2018, 1st of January 2018. I must have logged in on New Year's Day for some random reason. I first played this again on the Xbox 360, I believe. It's not held in particularly high regard, I don't think, by a lot of people, but I have fond memories of feelings about Strider. I don't remember a huge amount about it, but when I try and cast my mind back to thinking about Strider, I don't have any kind of really negative emotions welling up. It's a 2.5D, modern, well, futuristic ninja Metroidvania, and in my opinion, it is pretty decent. Sundered didn't play properly. Tales of Iron is very Souls-like, but I haven't finished. Teslagrad also haven't finished, but I haven't finished it because I didn't like it. I didn't like the feel of the game. I didn't like the floatiness of the combat. Tales of Iron, I do like the feel of the game. I just haven't finished it because I haven't finished it. I did start making a map for it as well, but I didn't finish it because other games were coming out. Teslagrad I won't go back to because I don't think it's very fun. The Fall. Weirdly enough, The Fall actually isn't under T for the on Steam. I've played 37 minutes of The Fall. I couldn't tell you a damn thing about it, unfortunately. It could be good, it could be bad, I don't know. I've literally got one achievement after 47 minutes, so I know nothing about The Fall. The Night Witch, on the other hand, I know is reasonably decent. It's not going to be for everybody. It's almost a shoot 'em up. It's a little bit like Bronte, but nowhere near as good as Bronte. Great art style, good animations, solid story, very playable, but yeah. The Messenger didn't finish. In fact, I got through the game up until it became a Metroidvania, and I played some of the Metroidvania bits, and I just never picked it up again. The Messenger's supposed to be really, really good, but I've got 6.7 hours in it. I've got fewer than half of the achievements available. I lost interest in it. I think because the opening pre-Metroidvania bit kind of annoyed me. So yeah, that's as far as I got. The Swapper, I've played 33 minutes of. So again, couldn't tell you anything about. I seem to recall, was it the Swapper the one which was about cloning or something? I can't remember. Can't remember anything about the Swapper at all. I've played 5.6 hours of The Vagrants. I don't know whether I completed the game. I haven't touched it since apparently 2018. Not memorable, so it's going down in D. Lunar Nights. I have finished it. I can't say I recommend it. If you were a fan of the Tuhao, however you pronounce it, kind of extended franchise, you might get some enjoyment out of it. I only played it because somebody asked me to make a map of it. I've got to admit, I didn't really get or enjoy the combat very much. I mostly just whizzed my way through it with some hacks to put together a map. It is what it was. The Tarnishing of Juxtia arguably isn't a Metroidvania. It's not a bad game. It's just not really a Metroidvania. I'd argue that it's a 2.5D Souls-like. It does have a map, though, so it's got that kind of Metroidvania-y element to it, so I've left it on the list. You might like it, just don't go into it expecting a Metroidvania. Two Parsecs from Earth is a Metroidvania. It's a Metroidvania where you have to make choices. Every time you collect an upgrade, you get one or the other. So you could have dash or double jump or whatever. It was a weird idea. I didn't enjoy the feel of the game, so I never finished it. Likewise, Unformed, haven't finished, couldn't even really tell you anything about the game. It's a Souls-like Metroidvania, according to this. Released in 2020. I haven't played it since 2020. Couldn't tell you anything about it. Could tell you, though, that Unworthy is a hidden gem. It's definitely not for everybody. It's rough around the edges, but it's got an interesting visual style. It's got great music. It's from the guys that are currently making Crowsworn, or one of the guys that are part of now a team that are creating Crowsworn. They had an unfortunate family emergency whilst they were post-release of Unworthy. They were actually taking on board quite a lot of feedback and working on some community feedback and critique. And then I believe tragedy struck, and the game essentially, I don't want to say it was abandoned because that's very unfair. The game is perfectly completable and playable, and you do actually need to complete it 2 or 3 times in order to get the true ending. It's got some really interesting ideas for how the cycle of essentially New Game Plus works. I really recommend Unworthy. It's one of the older games that I've played. In fact, I've got to play through again on the channel. But I recommend you play it for yourself because it's a Metroidvania where you can't jump. There's no jump move in the game. And that makes it very weird and very interesting to play. So, yeah, your mileage with Unworthy is very much going to vary. What else have we got? Valdis Story. I did, to the best of my remembrance, complete Valdis Story. I've got 11.2 hours in it. Was that enough to complete it? I don't know. Yeah, in fact, I've got an achievement saying beat the game as Wyatt, so I definitely completed the game. Couldn't tell you anything about it. So I'm going to have to put it down in D because I can't remember. Don't know why Vaporum's on there, because that's not a Metroidvania. Vigil, The Longest Nights is not for everybody. It is a Souls-like Metroidvania through and through. It's got some ever so slightly janky controls. It's got a really interesting premise. It's got several gigantic maps, dungeon maps, outside overworld maps, weird, twisted Lovecraftian realm maps. Vigil's a good one. I really enjoyed Vigil. How much time have I got in Vigil at this? 91.9 hours in Vigil. Multiple endings. It's really, really good. I really, really liked it. But again, it is Souls-like. The combat is not going to be for everybody. Whoopo, I haven't played. Zeodrifter. I've got 4.5 hours in Zeodrifter, and I've got most of the achievements. But I couldn't tell you whether I enjoyed it or not. I vaguely recall that I did, so I'm going to put it up there, but the fact that I can't remember anything about my playtime with it isn't necessarily a good sign. Your mileage is going to vary with that. Yoku's Island Express, on the other hand, I can very easily put into C tier. Yoku's Island Express is a pinball Metroidvania. You are essentially flipping a pinball around a map and exploring, and therefore it is one of the most unique games on this list. It's got really charming music. It's got some really good writing, actually. I really liked Yoku's Island Express. Got about 10 hours played, almost all of the achievements. Why did I not get that last one? The last one was a perfectionist achievement, and it required perfectionism, which I just didn't have the patience for. Apparently they introduced a randomized mode at some point in 2021, a couple of years after I played it. I don't think I'm going to go back and try that. Zappling Bygone also goes up into the C tier. It's reasonably short, made by a one-man development team, if I remember correctly. Very competently done. Some interesting humor in there, some interesting ideas, some slightly derivative choices in terms of a charm style system, but with enough flavor to make it stand out. It's not what you might call a looker of a game, and it's not going to break your bank. I played about 7 hours of it to get 100% completion and make a map. So, yeah. An hour and 50 minutes later, I knew this was going to take a while. But, yeah. I feel like there are some bits and pieces that I've missed off. But there we have my tier list for all of the Metroidvanias that I own or have played. I'm expecting this to be updated with Afterimage. Where is Afterimage? Afterimage and Benedict Fox reasonably soon. I think these tier lists get saved, don't they? I think they get saved, so I can come back and play around with this later. Biogun, I don't know when that's releasing, so I couldn't tell you when that's going to get updated. Based on what I've played of them currently, I kind of feel like the Last Case of Benedict Fox is going to be somewhere in the B, possibly A tier, simply because I like the premise of it. Afterimage is probably also going to be in the B/low A tier because of what I've played of it. Biogun's probably going to go fairly high as well if the demo quality can stick the landing. But yes, I've talked for almost 2 hours straight. There we go. The people that have been asking for my recommendations for Metroidvanias, as I said, this list wasn't planned. These tiers weren't planned. I haven't thought about this in advance. I might want to move things around at some point in the future the more I think about them. But just as a gut feeling reaction off the top of my head, this is where I have placed the games that I have played. It is absolutely okay if you have things in different places. I know, for example, games like Soldiers, some people hold in much higher regard. Some games like Super Metroid and Symphony of the Night, people might put up in the top tier. People might not put Grime or Ender Lilies up there. It's an entirely subjective tier listing, and I'm not doing this because I want people to agree with me. I have literally only done this because people have asked me for my recommendations as somebody who has made a lot of maps and therefore knows what they like about the genre quite well. Just gut reaction. This is my answer. I'll link to this, assuming I can. I think it sticks around. I'll link to this in the description below so that you can see it and see any changes that I have made since this video was released. But my throat is now getting a bit sore, so I'm going to shut up. Hope you have enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything on here that you think is particularly egregious for yourselves. And I'll catch you all in the next one. Demajen, maker of Metroidvania maps, player of Metroidvania games, out. Peace. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, why not click the like button and consider subscribing. Remember, you can ring the bell notification icon to get notified when new videos go live. And until next time, cheerio.